Why was she always the one left at the edge of the room? No one noticed her beyond the clipboard, beyond the rows of neatly stacked magazines she counted with machine-like precision. To them, she was invisible, a civilian contractor doing monotonous work under the buzzing hum of Fort Benning's fluorescent lights. But invisibility had its uses. It gave her time to breathe, time to exist in silence, time to not be who she really was. Alexander Morgan, to most just Alex. Dark hair tied back tight, posture too straight for a depot worker, eyes that missed nothing. She carried herself with quiet efficiency, every motion economical, her presence unremarkable on purpose. People passed her in the corridors without second glances. She was reliable, private, punctual. That was the story she had chosen for herself, the story she needed them to believe. Yet behind that quiet mask was a name once whispered across battlefields, a call sign carried in reverence and fear alike. Cold Flame, the sniper who had done the impossible again and again, the woman who had broken records with kills that mathematics, who had vanished in fire and betrayal, officially dead, buried in files with thick black redactions. But not here, not now. The sound of boots against polished concrete broke the hum of silence. Colonel William approached, tall and rigid even in his 60s, silver hair cropped in the same high and tight he'd worn since Desert Storm. His eyes, weathered by decades of combat, had the stillness of a man who had seen too much but refused to flinch. He carried an aura of command, the kind that never left men who had once led others through chaos. "Mr. Morgan," he said, voice gravel-edged as though used to cutting through gunfire. She didn't correct him, didn't explain the name, just nodded and handed over her clipboard. Her fingers brushed his briefly, efficient, firm, a gesture with no warmth, no invitation. Scanned the sheet, his eyes moving in strict columns. Rows of numbers, serials, quantities. Each line was perfect, balanced, aligned, nothing out of place. Then he saw it, faint, almost erased from time, stamped at the top in fatting black ink. A code name, a word he hadn't heard aloud in years. Cold Flame. He froze, the clipboard weighed heavier in his hands now. His pulse thudded once hard against his ribs. He'd heard stories, every soldier in his generation had. A sniper who could thread a bullet through a storm, who could disappear in mountains as if she were part of the rock itself. 290 confirmed kills, the most lethal operator in modern American history, and dead. Supposedly, body never recovered, file sealed. But here, standing in front of him under the sterile lights of a weapons depot, was a woman whose eyes were the same as the ones in that file. Predatory, calculating, alive. "Is there a problem with the inventory, Colonel?" she asked. Her voice was level, controlled, but there was something underneath, a test. He handed the clipboard back slowly. "No problem at all, Ms. Morgan." His tone was casual, too casual. His fingers lingered on the clipboard longer than they should have. Both of them knew the truth. He had seen her, really seen her. The mask had slipped, even if just for a breath. She returned to her work with quiet precision, stacking magazines as though nothing had happened. Yet inside, her mind calculated angles, exits, contingencies. The colonel's recognition was a crack in the walls she had built around herself, and cracks spread. The game had begun. But the story didn't start here, in the fluorescent shadows of Fort Benning. It started years earlier, in mountains where the air burned your lungs and silence itself could kill you. Afghanistan, 2018, pre-dawn. She lay prone on a rocky outcropping, suit blending with scrub brush, her body aching after 3 days of stillness. Every nerve in her body was alive, stretched tight as a bowstring. Her scope, a Mark V HD, filled her world. Through it she watched the compound below, waiting, always waiting. The cold bit into her cracked lips, thirst gnawed at her throat, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the target, Al, a name that carried weight in every intelligence briefing, a man who orchestrated chaos across provinces, his hands stained with American blood. "Cold Flame, this is Watchdog," a voice whispered in her ear. "Target confirmed, green light." Her breathing slowed. Her finger settled on the trigger. The TAC-338 was more than a weapon. It was part of her, an extension of bone and will, honed through years of training and thousands of rounds. She calculated wind drift, humidity, elevation. She let the numbers thread themselves into instinct, into something beyond thought. Then silence, one heartbeat, two, three. The rifle cracked. The bullet traveled 1.5 kilometers across air that bent and shifted, defying the elements before finding its mark. Al collapsed mid-stride, the chaos of his compound exploding around him. But her voice, when it came across the comms, was flat, cold. Target down. She dismantled the rifle with practiced calm, packing it away piece by piece. Her heart never raced. Her breath never faltered. That was the legend of cold flame, emotionless as ice, deadly as fire. But legends come with a cost. Back at base, debriefings dragged long, too detailed, too insistent. They pressed her on calculations, on parameters, on variables. At the time, she told herself it was because of the distance, because she had done something no one else could. But later, in darker hours, she would realize it had been something else. The first crack. The first sign that she was not just completing missions, she was carrying secrets someone didn't want revealed. Years passed, missions stacked on missions, and then came the borderlands of Pakistan, the ambush, the betrayal, the helicopter fireball. Her mentor, her anchor, lost in flames, and Alex herself, broken in a hospital bed, told she was dead, buried in silence. That was how Cold Flame ended, officially. And yet, here she stood in Fort Benning, counting magazines like a ghost haunting her own life. Colonel walked away, his mind a storm of memories and suspicions. He had seen soldiers die. He had read reports on heroes who would never come home. And now he had to reconcile the impossible, a ghost in flesh, alive, standing in his armory. That night Alex sat alone in her apartment. Spartan, bare, more like a barracks than a home, a laid out on the table, a single photograph tucked into the corner, smiling with pride the day she'd qualified as a sniper. His hand on her shoulder, his eyes saying what he never had to speak, "You were made for this." She traced the edge of the photo with her fingertip, whispering to the silence, "What would you tell me now?" Her mentor's voice rose in her memory, words he had spoken once when she had doubted herself in a storm-swept range. Your skills weren't given to you so you could hide them away. They were given so you could protect those who can't protect themselves. Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes. For 2 years she had buried Cold Flame. Let the world think she was dead. Let herself become a ghost in a depot, but ghosts don't stay buried forever. And somewhere out there was pulling threads. Someone else was pulling strings. And the truth of what happened that night on Thieves' Road, the truth of who betrayed her team, was still out there, buried under redactions and lies. She holstered sat in silence, and for the first time in years she allowed the thought to surface. Cold Flame was not dead. Not yet. What happens when the voice in your ear goes silent? When the people you trust most vanish into chaos, leaving only smoke and betrayal behind? That question haunted Alex Morgan every night. Even here in the supposed safety of Fort Benning, it crept into her sleep. She'd wake in the dark, sweat-soaked, hearing echoes of a radio transmission that never reached her team. A warning swallowed by static, a chance stolen, and then the world exploding around them. 2 years hadn't dulled it. If anything, time sharpened it like a blade drawn across her own memories until they cut her open again and again. Pakistan 2021, Thieves' Road. The mission was meant to be routine. A courier, a handoff, nothing extraordinary. Yet even then, Alex had sensed something off. The man carried a black case strapped to his body, heavier than a messenger bag, marked by the kind of discipline that didn't belong to a simple runner. She'd whispered her doubts too, lying prone beside her on the ridgeline, scopes trained on the shadowed path below. "That's no ordinary package," she'd said. had grunted in agreement, wind tugging at his weathered face. His voice carried the weight of wars fought long before she joined. Diplomatic pouch. Modified. I've seen it before. Somalia. Iraq. Someone's moving classified materials without wanting them tracked. Before they could speak more, the first RPG cut the night in half. Fire lit the ridge. Automatic gunfire erupted from 3 sides. Her team below, Walker, 2 others she barely remembered now, were caught in a perfect kill box. Muzzle flashes in the dark. Ambush. Alex didn't think. She fired. 1, 2, 3. Each shot an answer to chaos, each kill just slowing the tide, but there were too many, too precise. This wasn't bad luck. This was orchestration. Fall back, secondary extraction. Walker's voice had cracked through the comms, panicked but commanding. She had shifted her scope back to the courier just in time to see him hand the black case to a figure in unmarked tactical gear. Calm, deliberate, not someone caught in a crossfire, someone playing a role. She snapped 3 photographs through her tactical camera, hands moving on instinct even as rounds snapped over her head. Evidence. Proof. Comms jammed, had growled beside her, smashing the radio with a fist. Someone in our frequencies. Then the mortars came. The ground erupted beneath them, showers of stone and fire. Had shoved her forward, pushing her toward cover, his own body taking the brunt of the blast. By the time they staggered down to regroup with the others, blood ran down his arm, but his focus never wavered. They made it to extraction, broken but breathing. 4 of them where 6 had stood hours before. Walker limping. 2 others gone. Alex's chest heaved with exhaustion as the helicopter blades thundered above. But hope died before they even lifted off. The rocket hit them broadside. The world spun. Metal tore like paper. She remembered falling, weightless, then the earth rushing up to meet her, his voice shouting her name. Then nothing. When she woke, there were tubes in her chest, wires in her arms, strangers in suits at her bedside. Smooth voices telling her the official story. She had died, had not survived. The mission was compromised at the highest levels, and until they found the leak, she would remain a ghost. Ghosts don't get explanations. Ghosts don't get justice. The memory pressed against her ribs as she stood in his office 2 years later. He had called her in quietly, at 900 sharp, blinds drawn, a signal jammer humming low in the corner. She sat across from him, posture sharp despite the unease chewing at her stomach. He didn't waste time. General Harrison wants me to recommend an instructor for an advanced marksmanship program. I know the perfect candidate. His eyes fixed on hers, unblinking. You. Alex didn't move, didn't flinch, but inside her pulse stumbled. I'm a depot worker, Colonel, she said evenly. I count magazines. He slid a folder across the desk. A photograph fell free, a younger her, face obscured by a scope glinting in Afghan sun. Classified, evidence that shouldn't be in his possession. You can change your name, said quietly, but you can't change your eyes. I served with, I know the look of a warrior. At the sound of his name, something in her chest twisted sharp. She forced it down, forced her face neutral. What do you want? She asked. Not what you think, he replied. I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to give you a choice. Teach these 12 operators what you know. Give them a fighting chance. And in return, I'll use my clearance to dig into what happened on your last mission. Someone betrayed you. Someone wanted Cold Flame dead. Her breath caught. She hated him for speaking it aloud, the thought she had buried so deep she never dared to voice it. Yet now it stood between them like a loaded weapon. What makes you think I want to step back into that world? She asked, voice low. His gaze softened for just a moment. Because counting magazines is killing you, because you still wake up at night with ghosts in your head, and because you want answers. Don't deny it. He was right. Damn him, he was right. That night in her apartment, she stared at 2 photographs on her table. One, her team, smiling in fatigues, weeks before the mission that destroyed them. The other, and her, standing side by side the day she had earned her sniper tab, his hand steady on her shoulder. She traced the image with trembling fingers. "What would you tell me?" she whispered. The answer came in memory, his voice gruff, steady, unyielding. "Your skills weren't given to you to rot. They were given to save people who can't save themselves." Her decision crystallized. She dialed. When he answered, she spoke 3 words that shifted everything. "I'm in." But she added a condition, sharp as steel: full access to files on my final mission. Didn't promise. Men like him never promised, but he agreed to share whatever he found. It was enough. For the first time in years, Alex felt something stir in her chest. Not hope, not peace, something older, sharper, purpose. The next morning, she walked into a briefing room where General Elizabeth Harrison herself waited. The general's eyes were sharp, her presence commanding. She acknowledged Alex not as cold flame, not even as Sergeant Morgan, but as Ms. Morgan, the quiet fiction they would all protect. "The facility is prepared," Harrison said, tapping a map. "Your operators arrive in 13 days. Their lives will depend on what you teach them." Alex flipped through the files, absorbing faces and records. Men decorated with silver stars, women carving space in male-dominated fields, veterans by wars that never ended. One stood out: Master Sergeant Tours. Skilled, confident, dangerously skeptical. And one woman, corporal, too young, too unsure, fighting to prove herself. Alex closed the file and slid it back. She asked one question only: "What's the mission?" Harrison and exchanged glances. "Classified," Harrison said. Alex's jaw tightened. She knew the dance. Need to know, compartmentalization, always the same game. But one detail gnawed at her. Every operator selected had combat experience in Central Asia, the same ground she had bled on, the same terrain where had died, the same shadow war that had stolen her life. Coincidence didn't exist in their world. That night she returned to her apartment. For the first time she noticed the door wasn't how she'd left it, a subtle shift, a lock that didn't catch right. She entered quiet, weapon raised, cleared the corners, empty. But the photo on her table had been moved, centered, and in the corner of the frame a tiny black dot blinked, a listening device, high-grade, military. She didn't touch it, didn't dismantle it. Instead, she left it. Sometimes silence was louder than resistance. Her phone rang, voice clipped and tense. "We need to meet, not on base. Diner, Highway 27, 30 minutes." She left a fake note on her counter for whoever was listening. "Dinner, groceries, back by 9. A breadcrumb for spies, a lie for liars." On the road she drove with every sense alive. Mirrors checked, shadows counted. The war had found her again. And somewhere in the darkness, the hunter was becoming the hunted. The diner looked like something forgotten by time. A lone neon sign buzzed weakly above the door, casting fractured light across cracked asphalt. The smell of fried food leaked through thin walls, heavy with grease and memory. Alex parked in the far corner of the lot, instinctively choosing a spot where she could see every approach. She scanned the mirrors, her mind tallying the rhythm of headlights passing on the highway. No tails, or none she couldn't lose if she needed to. Inside, the place was nearly empty. 2 truckers at the counter, a waitress refilling coffee, and in the farthest booth, Colonel. He sat with his back to the wall, eyes fixed on the entrance. A soldier's habit, a survivor's habit. Alex slid into the booth across from him, her resting heavy beneath her jacket. On the table lay a manila folder, edges worn, its surface stamped with classification marks that had no business leaving a secure facility. "You weren't followed," said his voice low. "No," she leaned forward. "But someone was in my apartment today, moved a photograph, left a listening device." His jaw tightened. "A warning." "Or a message," she countered. "Depends on who sent it." Her eyes dropped to the folder. "What's that?" He glanced around the diner before nudging it toward her. "Something buried. Took me hours to dig out. It wasn't supposed to exist. Alex opened it. Inside, a single document, an after-action report from her last mission. Not the heavily redacted one she'd seen before. This one was different. Whole. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the lines. Dates, times, communications, words that pulled her back into the burning night of Thieves Road. Then her eyes locked on one entry. 2:47 hours, Overwatch compromised, abort mission. She froze, the words blurred then sharpened again. She whispered them aloud. Abort mission. His eyes met hers. The order was sent, but it never reached you. Her throat tightened. Someone intercepted it. Deliberately. Her hands clenched around the paper, crumpling its edges. The ambush hadn't just been a leak. It hadn't just been bad intelligence. Someone had silenced the warning. Someone had chosen for her team to die. Who had access to this channel? She demanded. Silence was heavy. Then he spoke. 4 names: General Harrison, Admiral Stevens, CIA Deputy Director, and General Blackwood, the Joint Operations Commander at the time. The list struck her like a blow. 4 powerful figures, any one of them capable of erasing lives with a signature. 4 people who had seen her team as disposable. Her chest tightened until she could barely breathe. Gone, Walker compromised, her own death faked, and at the center of it all, command. She turned to the last page. A reference note, small, almost hidden, courier photos, filed separately, restricted access. Her stomach twisted. The photographs she had taken, the ones she had risked everything to capture. Proof that the courier had handed a black case to someone in unmarked tactical gear. Proof the ambush wasn't random at all. Who accessed them? She asked. His voice dropped lower, as though the walls themselves might be listening. Once, 12 hours after the ambush, by Admiral Stevens. The name settled between them like a loaded rifle. Alex leaned back, the vinyl seat squeaking beneath her. She forced her voice steady. Why show me this now? Studied her face, the lines etched deep with something that wasn't pity, but something close. Because tomorrow you begin training 12 operators who might be walking into the same kind of trap, and because Stevens will be observing your program. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the neon sign outside buzzed faintly. Somewhere, a truck rumbled past on the highway. You're using me, she said finally. He didn't deny it. I'm giving you a chance to prepare them to survive, and maybe, he let the word hang, to find out who's responsible. Her eyes narrowed. Or you're setting me up as bait. His gaze didn't flinch. Maybe both. She exhaled slowly, forcing calm into her voice even as her pulse hammered in her throat. She had lived long enough in shadows to recognize when she was being maneuvered, and she had learned that bait could cut its own line if it was sharp enough. Watch your back, Ms. Morgan, said as he rose from the booth, leaving the folder behind. You're not the only hunter in these woods. She stayed seated after he left, fingers running along the file's worn edges. For 2 years she had existed in silence. But silence was a weapon too, one she had learned to wield. Outside, the Georgia night pressed close. As she stepped into the cool air, every nerve was alive. She felt eyes on her, somewhere in the darkness. She moved to her car slowly, deliberately, scanning reflections, gauging angles. She drove, headlights carving through pines, the road stretching into shadow. And then she saw it, a dark SUV, 2 cars behind. Steady distance. Same turns, professional. Surveillance. Instead of panicking, she leaned back in her seat, adjusted her mirror. Breath slow. If they wanted to follow her, let them. She led them into a shopping center, parked near the crowded entrance. She disappeared inside, weaving through service corridors until she slipped out the back. By the time the SUV circled, she was gone, sliding into a taxi with cash and a false ID. At a hotel miles away, she locked the door and set her on the nightstand. The silence of the room was heavy. She sat on the bed, staring at her weapon, at her reflection in the mirror. She thought of Walker's betrayal of the names in that folder. She thought of Stephen's cold eyes, his smile that never reached them. They were watching her, hunting her, but they had forgotten one thing. Cold Flame had never been prey. Not once. The training facility looked nothing like Fort Bennink's endless gray corridors. Hidden deep in the Georgia pine forest, it was isolated, quiet, designed for shadows. A converted hangar served as the heart of it, classrooms, weapons bays, and simulation chambers. Behind it stretched ranges that seemed to fade into the tree line, some pushing distances over 2 kilometers. Alex arrived before dawn. Old habits wouldn't let her do otherwise. She walked the grounds alone, fingers brushing cold steel rails, eyes scanning sight lines, corners, blind approaches. It was instinct, carved into her bones. Even here, even as an instructor, she couldn't stop mapping threats. She stopped at the weapons rack, hands closing around a MRAD. Sleek, familiar, heavy. She checked the chamber, the bolt, the scope, every motion automatic. The rifle settled into her hands like it remembered her. Impressive system, isn't it? The voice slid through the quiet like a blade. Alex turned. Admiral Stephen stood in the doorway, not in uniform but in civilian clothes that couldn't mask the military bearing beneath them. He carried himself with the calm arrogance of a man who had been obeyed all his life. His eyes, cold, analytical, studied her. She forced her voice even. "Admiral, I wasn't expecting you until later." "I like to arrive unannounced," he said smoothly. "People reveal more that way." He stepped closer, examining the rifle she held. "You seem familiar with this platform. Odd for an inventory specialist." It was a test. She recognized it instantly. "I've been reviewing specifications," she said calmly, placing the rifle back in its slot. "Colonel values attention to detail." He tilted his head, studying her, searching for cracks. Interesting choice, bringing a civilian into such a specialized program. Fresh perspective, I suppose. She met his gaze without blinking. Sometimes fresh eyes see what experience overlooks. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then his lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Indeed. As he walked away, Alex released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He hadn't said her name, not her real one, but his scrutiny felt too sharp, too knowing. Like a hunter circling prey, waiting for a mistake. At 800 hours, the operators filed in, 12 of them. Civilian training attire, but everything about their movements screamed combat experience. Quiet confidence, watchful eyes. Alex stood in front of them, letting silence stretch until it pressed heavy. Had taught her that silence could command more respect than shouting ever could. "My name is Morgan," she said at last. "For the next 6 weeks, I'll train you for deployment conditions that will push your skills beyond conventional limits." Master Sergeant Torres leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Mid-30s, former ranger, a lean predator's build. His eyes were sharp, skeptical, already dissecting her. "With respect, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. "What qualifies a civilian contractor to train special operations personnel?" The challenge was expected. She welcomed it. "Fair question," Alex said. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. Instead, she picked up a Remington MSR from the rack, performed a rapid function check, and lay prone at the 1,000-meter range. "Standard qualification requires consistent shot groups at 600 meters," she said calmly, adjusting the scope. "Special operations extends that to 800. She fired 3 shots in quick succession. Through the operator's spotting scopes, the target came into focus. 3 bullet holes forming a triangle smaller than a playing card, 1,000 meters away. She stood, letting the silence work again. "That's why Colonel selected me." The shift in the room was subtle but real. Even Torres, skeptical as he was, let out a low whistle. Respect had to be earned in this world, and she had just earned it. The day stretched long. Assessments, calculations, observing their fundamentals. Torres was as skilled as his file suggested, his groups tight at medium range, though he faltered when environmental variables shifted. His confidence, however, never wavered, not in his aim, not in the way he studied her when he thought she wasn't looking. Corporal Sarah, the youngest, struggled more. Her math was flawless, her technique clean, but her hesitation bled into every trigger pull, especially when Tor's eyes were on her. Alex watched it happen again and again, a pause, a breath too long, a split second of doubt. After the session, Alex called her aside. "Your calculations are perfect," Alex said quietly, "but you hesitate, why?" Stared at the ground. "I don't know, ma'am, maybe." "You care what they think," Alex interrupted. "Every time Torres watches you, your split time increases by 0.8 seconds. That's the difference between mission success and failure." The young Marine's eyes lifted, startled. Alex didn't soften her tone. "You're not here to earn their approval. You're here to hit targets. Let your shooting speak." She handed a rifle. "One more drill, no audience, just you and the target." Under the quiet Georgia sky, breathed, aimed, and fired. One after another, her shots rang true, cutting through the distance with precision. When she looked up, Alex met her gaze. "That's who you are," Alex said softly. "Remember it when the audience comes back." The flicker of confidence in his eyes reminded Alex of herself, years ago, when had first stripped her excuses away and forced her to stand on skill alone. As the operators cleaned weapons at day's end, Torres approached. His voice carried a grudging respect. "That 1,000-meter group, not many can shoot like that, even in special operations." Alex nodded. "Sometimes circumstances require it." He studied her face carefully. "What circumstances are we preparing for exactly?" "That information is classified," she replied evenly. "Focus on your shooting." But Tor's eyes narrowed. He wasn't satisfied, and he wasn't done watching her. At the back of the range, Admiral Stevens lingered, arms folded, expression unreadable. His voice cut the air as Alex walked past. "Impressive," he said, "almost reminiscent of another shooter I once knew, remarkable similarities in technique." Ice slid through her veins, but her voice was steady. "The fundamentals of marksmanship are universal, Admiral." "Perhaps," he said, his eyes narrowing, "perhaps not." She kept walking, but the weight of his gaze pressed into her back long after she left. That night driving home, Alex noticed headlights in her mirror. The same dark SUV from before, same distance, same precision. She led them into a crowded shopping center, disappeared through service corridors, and reemerged blocks away, slipping into a taxi. At the hotel, she stripped her down on the desk, piece by piece, cleaning it methodically. Her thoughts sharpened with every motion. Stevens was probing, Torres was watching, was searching for confidence, and somewhere in the shadows, surveillance teams were building a case against her. She wasn't just teaching anymore, she was being tested, hunted. But if Stevens thought he was the only predator on this ground, he'd forgotten who she was. Cold Flame didn't miss. Not then, not now, not ever. What do you do when the room itself feels like a trap? When every word spoken carries two meanings, and every silence is louder than the truth? Alex felt it the moment she stepped into the briefing chamber. The room was buried in the facility's lower levels, windowless, sealed by steel doors. A digital clock ticked overhead, its red numbers steady, almost mocking. General Elizabeth Harrison sat at the head of the table, posture rigid, hands folded, eyes sharp with the calm of someone who had seen too many wars from too many angles. Beside her, CIA Deputy Director leaned back in his chair, polished and calculated, his suit crisp as his smile. And at the far end, Admiral Stevens, shadowed in his silence, eyes fixed on Alex the way a hawk fixes on prey. Colonel stood in the corner, arms crossed, a silent anchor in the storm. "Ms. Morgan," Harrison began, her tone clipped, "you've spent the last 2 weeks assessing the candidates. Your evaluation." Alex sat spine straight. They're competent, experienced. Each brings strengths. Torres is a natural leader but overconfident, shows potential but struggles under pressure. Overall, they're capable, but they're not ready. Smile sharpened. Not ready for what? That depends, Alex said evenly. What exactly are you preparing them for? Silence stretched. Harrison's expression didn't change. Tapped his pen once against the table. Stevens leaned forward, his gaze cutting through the air. This program, Stevens said finally, is a contingency. A specialized strike package designed for environments where conventional forces are politically inconvenient. Alex's chest tightened. Deniable, disposable. She'd seen this game before. Took over, his voice smooth, rehearsed. Intelligence confirms that a rogue faction in Kazakhstan has secured advanced MANPADS systems, portable anti-aircraft missiles capable of downing military or civilian aircraft. They've already demonstrated capability against Russian transports. If those systems proliferate, regional stability collapses. Alex listened, her mind racing. The cover story was clean, too clean, delivered with just enough urgency to feel authentic, just enough vagueness to hide what mattered. "Why us?" she asked quietly. "Because," Stevens said, his tone razor-sharp, "this cannot trace back to us. Conventional units are out of the question. NATO is paralyzed. Russia has deniability, and Washington needs flexibility." He let the word hang like a threat. Her eyes flicked too. He said nothing. His silence was its own warning. Slid a file across the table. Satellite imagery. A compound tucked into Kazakhstan's western highlands. Guard rotations. Heat signatures. This is your target. 6 weeks from now, your operators will infiltrate, neutralize the threat, and exfiltrate without detection. Failure isn't an option. Alex's fingers hovered over the photographs. A familiar chill crept through her. She had studied images like this before Afghanistan, before Pakistan, before died in fire and betrayal. She forced her voice steady. "If they're compromised." Smile didn't waver. "They won't be, that's why you're here." Stevens leaned back, watching her. "Remarkable how familiar you seem with this type of operation, Ms. Morgan. Almost practiced." Her heartbeat thudded once hard, but she didn't blink. "I read fast." The Admiral's smile was thin. "Of course." The briefing moved forward, numbers and logistics flowing like a current designed to sweep her into compliance. But Alex wasn't listening to the details anymore. She was listening to the silence between words. A deniable strike team, a target too convenient, a narrative too polished. It was a setup. She could feel it in her bones. Afterward, as the room emptied, Harrison stopped her with a glance. "Walk with me." They moved down the corridor in silence until they reached a side office. Harrison closed the door, her voice low but sharp. "You don't trust." Alex studied her carefully. "Do you?" The general's expression tightened. "Plays politics. Stevens plays power. Neither care about the lives of your operators. You need to prepare them anyway." "Prepare them for what?" Alex pressed. Harrison's eyes softened for just a breath. "For betrayal." The word struck like a blow. When Alex returned to her quarters, she sat in the dark, the Kazakhstan file spread across her table. The images stared back at her, black and white shadows of a place where lives would be risked, where blood would be shed. She thought of Torres, skeptical but sharp, of fighting her own hesitation, of the others, each with a family, a history, a life beyond the uniform, and she thought of the fire, the silence, the betrayal that had ended him. Her reflection stared back at her from the window. Not Alex Morgan, the depot worker, not Ms. Morgan, the civilian instructor, but the ghost they had tried to bury. Cold flame. Her skills had once been used for missions like this. Missions that didn't exist on paper, where those who bled were erased, their names never spoken. She had survived. Others hadn't. And now, They wanted her to prepare 12 more to walk that same path. Her phone buzzed, a message, no number, no trace. They're not sending you to train them. They're sending you to test them. And Stevens already knows who you are. She stared at the screen, her pulse pounding in her ears. Whoever had sent it was inside the system, watching, waiting. She deleted it immediately, but the words carved into her mind. Not training, testing. She leaned back, the weight of silence pressing heavy around her. She was being used as bait, yes. But worse, the operators she was training weren't just students. They were pawns in a game that had already decided how it ended. Her fists clenched around the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. If Stevens thought he could bury her again, he had underestimated her. She would train them, she would sharpen them, but she would also prepare them for the truth no file, no briefing, no polished lie would ever give them. Because sometimes, survival depended not on orders, but on knowing when to disobey. And this time, if betrayal came, they would be ready. What do you tell a group of warriors when you know they're being sharpened for a blade that might cut their own throats? Alex stood before the 12 operators at dawn, the Georgia mist clinging to the range, her voice steady but cold. From this point on, you're not training for qualification. You're training for survival. Out there, no one cares about your records, your medals, or your rank. All that matters is what you can do in the next 60 seconds, and whether you walk away. The words hung in the air like frost. The drills escalated. Long-distance shots under exhaustion, moving targets while carrying full combat loads, night operations with strobing lights and disorienting sound designed to mimic chaos. She stripped away comfort, stripped away habit, until only raw instinct remained. Torres met every challenge with grit, his confidence unshaken. He was skilled, fast, deadly accurate. But his arrogance showed in the small things, a smirk when hesitated, a dismissive glance at Alex when he thought her orders pushed too far. During a live-fire stress drill, Alex caught him cutting corners, relying on brute speed over precision. She didn't raise her voice. She simply took the rifle from his hands, reset the course, and ran it herself. Weighted vest, blinding lights, blasting sirens, targets popping from unpredictable angles. Her shots cracked through the chaos, each one precise, unhurried, lethal. When the last target fell, silence returned to the range. She dropped the rifle at Tor's feet. Speed without precision gets people killed. Control the chaos or the chaos controls you. Tor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Respect, reluctant but real, flickered in his eyes. Later approached her during weapons maintenance. Her hands trembled as she cleaned the bolt carrier of her rifle. "How do you shut it out?" she asked quietly. Alex paused. "Shut what out?" "The voices," whispered. "The doubt, the noise in your head when everything's falling apart." For a moment, Alex saw herself years ago, lying in the Afghan mountains, the silence pressing on her chest like a weight, his voice steady in her ear. "You don't shut it out," Alex said softly. "You let it in, and then you focus on what's real, breath, scope, trigger. The target doesn't care if you're scared, it doesn't care if you're tired. The bullet only goes where you put it." His eyes lifted. "And if I miss?" "Then you correct, and you don't miss twice." A fragile smile tugged its mouth. It wasn't confidence yet, but it was a spark. The weeks blurred into sweat, gunpowder, and exhaustion. Alex watched them transform. Hesitation burned away. Weakness hardened into resolve. They began to move as one, 12 individuals forged into something sharper. But with every improvement, the weight in Alex's chest grew heavier. She knew where this path led. She could see it in the classified maps spread across her table at night, in the photographs of a Kazakh compound too neatly packaged. They weren't training for survival. They were training for sacrifice. One evening, she found Torres waiting outside the range long after the others had left. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You're not telling us everything," he said flatly. Alex met his gaze. "I'm telling you what you need to know." "That's not good enough," Torres snapped. "These people, my people, are trusting you with their lives. If there's something coming, we deserve to know." Her jaw clenched. She admired his loyalty, his fire, had been the same, protective, relentless. But loyalty could be deadly when truth was poisoned. "You'll have your briefing soon," she said. "Until then, focus on the work." Torres stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You shoot like someone who's been there. You move like someone who's lost people. You can play the civilian game all you want, but I see it. And so do the others. Sooner or later, we'll find out who you really are." She held his gaze, unflinching. "Then wait until sooner comes. Until then, do your job." He left without another word, but the tension lingered. That night, Alex sat alone in her apartment, stripping her down piece by piece, her hands moving automatically. Her phone buzzed once, a new message. No number. "He's watching you closer now. Steven's suspects, be careful." She deleted it, but the warning stayed, echoing in her chest. The next morning, Stevens appeared at the range unannounced. He walked among the operators like a man inspecting property, asking pointed questions, his eyes never far from Alex. "Interesting techniques," he said casually as she supervised a drill. "Almost identical to methods once used by a certain sniper unit in Afghanistan. I believe they called her Cold Flame." Her pulse thudded once, but her face stayed calm. "I've studied widely. Good techniques deserve to be replicated." Stephen's smile was thin. "Of course." As he turned away, Torres caught Alex's glance. His eyes narrowed, suspicion and understanding flickering together. He didn't know the full truth, not yet, but he was close. The day ended in silence, the operators exhausted, their sweat soaking into Georgia dirt. Alex dismissed them, then lingered alone on the range. She raised her rifle, sighting a distant target, letting the scope fill her world. Breath, scope, trigger. For a moment the noise faded. For a moment it was just her and the shot. The round cracked, striking dead center. But as the echo faded, so did the calm, because she knew every perfect shot brought them closer to Kazakhstan, closer to betrayal, closer to the fire that had already burned her once. And this time, she wouldn't be the only one consumed. What do you say to people you've sharpened into weapons, when you know the hand that wields them doesn't care if they break? The pre-deployment briefing was held in the underground chamber again, the one that felt more like a vault than a room. Maps spread across the table, routes marked in red. The satellite images of the Kazakh compound, every angle dissected, every shadow measured. Led the presentation, his words smooth, too rehearsed. "Your infiltration window is 72 hours. Night drop insertion, high altitude, low open. Advance to the compound undetected, neutralize personnel, secure weapons systems by rotary." The operators listened in silence, their faces carved from stone. Tor's jaw clenched as he studied the maps, scribbled notes furiously, her pen shaking only slightly. Stephen sat apart, saying little, but his eyes tracked everything. Alex felt his gaze settle on her like crosshairs. When finished, Harrison added the last note. "This mission does not exist. No recognition. No extraction guarantees. If compromised, you are on your own." The words dropped into the silence like lead. Deniability, disposable, exactly as Alex had feared. After dismissal, the operators filed out in groups. Torres lingered. He waited until they were alone in the corridor, his voice low but edged with fire. "This isn't right," he said. "They're setting us up." Alex forced calm into her voice. "What makes you think that?" Tor's eyes locked on hers. "Because I've seen this before, missions that don't exist, briefings that smell too clean. And you," he jabbed a finger at her, "you're not telling us everything. You know more than you say, and if you don't start talking, people will die." Her chest tightened. He was right, but the weight of silence pressed down like chains. She couldn't break cover, not yet, not with Stevens circling. Tor stepped closer. Who are you really? Her breath caught, but before she could answer, appeared at the end of the hall. She froze, catching the tension, eyes wide. Alex straightened, her voice sharp enough to cut. Focus on the mission, Master Sergeant. That's all that matters. Tor's jaw worked, anger burning, but he backed off. For their sake, I hope you're right, he muttered before walking away. Lingered, eyes searching Alex's face. For the first time, she didn't look timid. She looked like she wanted truth. Is he wrong? Asked softly. Alex couldn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she gave her something else. What matters is this. When the chaos comes, trust your training, trust yourself. Don't wait for orders that might never arrive. Nodded slowly, not convinced, but listening. That night, Alex returned to her quarters to find another message waiting. A slip of paper tucked under her door. No footprints, no sound of intrusion. The last time you ignored the signs died. Don't repeat the mistake. Her hands trembled as she held the note. She remembered its voice, steady in the storm. Your skills weren't given to you to hide. They were given to protect. But protecting meant breaking silence, and breaking silence meant exposure. The following morning, Stevens appeared at the range again. He moved among the operators with casual arrogance, offering critiques that felt more like barbed hooks. When missed a shot under pressure, his voice sliced across the air. Unacceptable. In the field, hesitation equals death. Alex stepped in, calm but firm. She corrected, she won't miss twice. Stevens' eyes flicked to her, narrowing. You seem very certain, almost protective. Instruction requires investment, she replied evenly. His smile was thin. Or maybe familiarity. Watching her, I'm reminded of another young operator once mentored by someone they called Cold Flame. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? The air between them froze. Alex didn't blink. I read case studies. Legends have their uses. Stevens leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. Legends have a way of returning, even when they're supposed to be dead. She held his gaze, the weight of silence pressing down until finally he turned away. The operators continued drilling, but the unease lingered. Torres shot glances at her, suspicion sharp. Stoll looks too, but hers were different, searching, questioning, almost pleading. That night, Alex sat alone with the Kazakhstan map spread before her. She traced the marked routes with a fingertip, the silence of her apartment pressing heavy. They were walking into fire. She knew it, would have known it, and every part of her screamed to stop it before it was too late. But the chains of silence held. Stevens' eyes were too close, lies too polished. One wrong word and she'd vanish again, not into exile this time, but into the ground. Her phone buzzed once more. No number, just 5 words. They won't all survive this. Alex closed her eyes, the weight of it crushing. She saw trembling hands, Tor's fierce eyes, the others sharpening under her drills. She heard its voice in memory. Sometimes survival depends on knowing when to disobey. She opened her eyes, breath steady. The decision was forming inside her like steel. If Stevens wanted pawns, he would get something else. If wanted silence, he would get resistance. And if betrayal was waiting in Kazakhstan, then so was she. Not as Alex Morgan, not as a civilian instructor, but as Cold Flame. What happens when the trap you feared becomes the ground you're standing on? The Kazakh mountains stretched below them in jagged silence, black ridges carved by ancient storms. The C-130 held steady at altitude, its red lights bathing the operators in a dim glow. Oxygen masks hissed, gear checked, no words spoken. Alex sat among them, gear indistinguishable, helmet strapped, rifle across her lap. She was not Alex Morgan here. She was not the depot worker, not the civilian instructor. She was the ghost they had buried and forgotten. Cold Flame. 2 minutes, the crew chief called. She scanned their faces. Tor's jaw set, eyes burning with unspoken questions. Hands steady now, her fear sharpened into resolve. The others, each carrying their own ghosts. They trusted her even if they didn't know why. She checked her altimeter, breath once, then they jumped. The night swallowed them. Canopies bloomed silent against the stars. They drifted over ridges and valleys until boots slammed into cold earth. Packs stripped, weapons drawn, they moved in silence through the mountains. The compound appeared hours later, lights faint against the rock, guard rotations, heat signatures just like the file, too neat. Alex felt the unease tighten in her chest. Every step closer felt like walking into memory. She whispered into the comms, "Stay sharp, expect deception." Tors gave a low grunt of acknowledgement, breath steady. They reached overwatch positions, snipers set scopes, breach team advanced, and then the silence shattered. Explosions tore the ridge apart. Machine guns roared from concealed nests. RPG trails lit the night. The compound wasn't a weapons cache. It was a kill box. Contact front, contact rear. Voices screamed through comms. Alex dropped prone, scope snapping to life. Target after target fell in rapid succession, her rifle cracking through chaos. But there were too many. Dozens, maybe more, flooding from hidden tunnels, trained, disciplined. Tor's voice cut through the chaos. "We're surrounded. This is a setup." "I know," Alex shouted, her voice sharper, harder than they had ever heard it. His voice broke through, shaking but steady. "Orders, ma'am." Time slowed. Alex saw it all, the ambush, the betrayal, the faces of her team from Pakistan, his hand on her shoulder. She had hidden for years, buried her name, buried her fire. But silence had no place here. She ripped the mask from her face, eyes blazing, voice carrying across the net like steel. "Follow me, hold the line. Cold flames not dead." The operators froze for half a heartbeat, recognition, shock, revelation, before training took over. They tightened formation, drew strength from the name she had just spoken. Her rifle spoke faster now, each shot precise, cutting through the chaos. Mirrored her, firing without hesitation, her groups tight, every bullet counted. Towards the flank, barking orders, his trust in her finally complete. But the enemy pressed harder. Ammunition ran thin, casualties mounted, blood stained the rocks. "Routes compromised," someone shouted. Alex scanned the ridge, her mind racing. Then she saw it, a narrow pass, half collapsed, a choke point. Dangerous, but survivable. "Tors, take the team through that pass," she ordered. "What about you?" he demanded. She loaded her last magazine, eyes cold, voice calm. "I'll cover you." "No," Tors snapped. "We leave together." Her eyes met his. For a moment there was no instructor, no skepticism, just soldiers bound by truth. "Do your job, Master Sergeant," she said softly. "Protect them. That's an order." He hesitated. Then he nodded, fury and respect burning together. "You better walk out of this." The team moved, glancing back once, eyes wide with something like fear, something like faith. Alex gave her the smallest nod. "Go." Then she turned back to the ridge, alone now. His voice echoed in memory. "Your skills weren't given to you to hide, they were given to protect." She breathed once, scope, trigger, crack. One target fell, then another, then another. She became ice and fire, a storm on the ridge, her rifle an extension of her soul. Enemies dropped in the dark, confusion spreading among them. For a moment the tide shifted. For a moment the legend of cold flame burned bright again. But legends are mortal. Rounds tore past her. A searing pain ripped through her shoulder, her side. She gritted her teeth, stayed prone, kept firing. One more shot, one more breath, each one buying time for the team. Through blurred vision, she saw them break through the pass, disappearing into the mountains. Alive. That was enough. The world narrowed. Sound dimmed. She thought of his steady hand, of the promise she had never spoken. She thought of carrying fire forward. She thought of Tors finally seeing her truth. Her final shot cracked, dead center. Then silence. Dawn crept across the mountains, painting the sky in pale fire. The surviving operators regrouped miles away, battered, bloodied, alive. Tor scanned the horizon, rage and grief warring in his eyes. "She stayed behind," whispered. Tor's voice was rough. "She saved us." No one spoke Cold Flame's name, but they didn't need to. They carried it now in their silence, in their survival. Back in Washington, Stevens would call it a failed mission, would bury it in files. The world would never know what happened on that ridge. But among the 12 who lived, the truth burned. A ghost had risen, and her fire had bought their lives. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes, legends aren't written in medals or headlines. They're written in silence, in sacrifice, in the echo of a rifle shot across forgotten mountains.